Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana League. I'm John as always, and it's day 5 of the Aether Revolt set review. That means we're going to be doing the 5th and final color, green. Tomorrow we will do gold and the first half of the artifacts, and the next day on Thursday we will do the rest of the artifacts and the sole single land. Now of course this is a limited only set review. You guys should know that by now. I do want to do one quick thing that I usually do at the end of the videos, and that's talk about my channel and subscribing to my channel. Very quick. If you've just come for the set reviews, if you're new to the channel, there's a ton more content after the set reviews. I will be doing a full pre-release recap. I will be opening packs of Aether Revolt and talking about pack 1 pick ones in draft next Tuesday. I will be doing a behind the shoulder full draft video recap of my first draft at FNM, box openings, etc., in addition to my usual weekly content. So make sure that you do subscribe if you want to see more Aether Revolt content and more Magic content in general. But we're going to jump on into the first card. Up first is Aether Herder, the last of the Aether cycle. Aether Herder is 3 and a green for a creature, elf, artificer, druid. At common, it's a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you of course get 2 energy, and when it attacks, you can pay 2 energy to get a 1/1 servo. This is a hill giant, which is mildly playable, a 3/3 for 4. At least this one likely has a chance to attack without just dying, like the white one does. The blue one can attack, but it's not going to do too much. So maybe you do actually get to make a servo with this one. I'm still just not sold on this cycle. I like the black one, of course, because of the death touch. The red one's decently aggressive, and this one's big, relatively anyways. I'm just not sure what that 1/1's going to do for you. You know, improvise, sure, artifact count, sure, but most of those decks aren't terribly aggressive in pushing for their little commons to get into the red zone that frequently. Still, this is a fine playable, but it's no higher pick than mid-pack at the earliest, and it's just kind of a card that you put in if you have it, and you're not going to go out of your way for it. So, middle of the road, C. Aether Stream Leopard is up next. Aether Stream Leopard is 2 and a green for a creature cat. There's a lot of cats on Kaladesh. Anyways, Aether Stream Leopard is a common. It's a 2/3. It has trample. When it enters the battlefield, you get a single energy, and then whenever it attacks, you can pay 1 energy, and if you do, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. 3 mana 2/3s aren't that great. We've talked about that a bunch. There's a fair number of them in the set, even with an energy attached to it. When it attacks, it's a 4/3 trample, which is nice for 4 and is probably a fine enough. Did I say 4? I meant 3. Probably a fine enough include in a green deck that's, kind of going big energy and going to be able to do that again and again and again. But if you're lacking in energy, then this only gets to be a 4/3 once or twice, maybe. It's just probably not going to be worth it in those decks. Be careful about main decking it and keep your energy amounts in mind. Because of this, you can probably pick it a little bit later, kind of mid-pack. I'm going to go with a C+. Assuming, of course, you're going to be making this a 4/3 most of the time that it attacks. If you can't, it's going to drop pretty heavily. So C+ for Aether Stream Leopard. Up next is a green mythic, Aether Wind Basker. Very cool looking lizard. 4 green for a creature lizard at mythic. It's a 7/7. It's got trample. Whenever Aether Wind Basker enters the battlefield or attacks, you get a single energy. Pay a single energy. Aether Wind Basker gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This is a very powerful bomb. Absolutely no question about it. 7 mana, 3 of it green. It's a little bit harsh. Ultimately still probably worth it, because come on, it's a 7/7, very importantly with trample, which means it is actually going to damage your opponent when they block with a servo or something like that. That takes this out of, kind of like, it's fine range to, yeah, this is really good range. Probably totally first pickable and playable. You're not splashing this. You need to be green to play this, but that shouldn't be that big of an issue, unless green is super massively overdrafted again in Aether Revolt, which it might be. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, I'm going to go with an A- on this just because of that triple green casting cost, but it's still just a straight up bomb. Pick this if you see it. Up next is Aid from the Cowl. Aid from the Cowl is 3 green for an enchantment at rare. It has Revolt, and that's all it has. Revolt, at the beginning of your end step, if you've revolted, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a permanent, you may put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you may put it on the bottom of your library. If you can reliably, preferably every single turn, trigger Revolt, and this should be pretty good. You get a permanent onto the battlefield, which means you're going to be ramping with a land, or you're going to be getting a creature, or you're going to be getting an enchantment or an artifact or something like that. Then this is going to be amazing because it's virtually free. If you whiff on that permanent, then you get to scry because it says you may put it on the bottom of your library. You may just leave it on top. That's pretty darn cool. Green doesn't usually get to scry a whole bunch. I'm sold if you're getting Revolt every single turn. If you are not, this is a total waste of mana. It's a 5 mana, do nothing enchantment, and you probably should not even think about playing it. So this depends, A, entirely on how reliable Revolt is as a mechanic in general, and it also depends on how reliably you are enabling it. I imagine this needs to be in green-white, because white has the majority of the easy Revolt, repeatable Revolt enablers in it. I'm going to keep an eye on this. It very well could be a huge first pick, build-around card. It could also be utter garbage. I'm going to go with a B- on it, assuming that reliable, repeatable, every turn Revolt. If it's not, C, D, F, something like that. So yeah, B-, assuming reliable Revolt. Druid of the Cowl is up next. It's 1 and a green for a creature elf druid at common. She's 1/3 and she has tap. Add green to your mana pool. This is the 2 mana dork of the set, and it's a very solid one if you ask me, because it blocks pretty darn well. It blocks all of the 2/2s and 2/3s and 2/1s that are in this set. It means that it doesn't die to shock. There's some very juicy ramp targets in this set, like Aether, whatever it was, Basker. I'm going to pick this druid quite highly. It'll be a first pick in packs that don't have removal or bombs for me. I love mana dorks, even when they're 2 mana, especially when they live through a fair bit of the early game stuff. I'm at a solid B on Druid of the Cowl. It's just a fantastic mana dork in a set that definitely would like to have it, and green gets more powerful. Greenbelt Rampager is up next. Greenbelt Rampager is a single green mana for a creature elephant at rare, and it's a 3/4. That sounds broken. However, when Greenbelt Rampager enters the battlefield, pay 2 energy. If you can't, return it to its owner's hand. And also get an energy, which is totally fine. This needs to come down before turn 4, though, for it to be truly impactful. Otherwise, it's just a kind of hard to cast Prakata Club Security, which is not a card that you were really excited to play. But if you can live that dream of the turn 1 turtle, turn 2 elephant, or something like that, then I think you're in good shape. Getting this turn 3 is still totally solid, but turn 4 it just becomes fairly vanilla, fairly boring kind of play. I'm not sold on this being first pickable, really. Not over removal, not over an actual bomb or anything like that. I can see losing in some swingy games when someone does turn 2 this, but, you know, I'll start at I guess a B- on this, but it really wildly swings depending on how much low cost, kind of hopefully 1 mana or 2 mana at the absolute most energy production you have, and getting this down early. If you cannot get this down early, it's basically just a Prakata Club Security, which is pretty mediocre. So B- with that assumption. Greenwheel Liberator is up next. Greenwheel Liberator is a 1 and a green creature elf warrior at rare. It's a 2/1. It has Revolt. When it enters the battlefield, it gets 2 +1/+1 counters if you've revolted this turn. This is going to make combat kind of a nightmare. I think the best/worst case scenario, depending on which side of the battlefield you're on, is on turn 2 or 3, you attack with something that would result in a trade. Your opponent says, yeah, sure, I'll trade with that. I'll block, and, you know, we both lose a creature. And then boom, suddenly you got a 4/3 on turn 2 or turn 3, way earlier than you should. Just like the elephant, this does get worse the later it comes down. It becomes less and less and less impactful if this is coming down on turn 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. Yeah, so I don't know. It's going to depend on how reliable Revolt comes down. The upside is that you can totally play this as a 2 mana 2/1, and that's okay. It's not generally what green wants to do. It's more of a red thing, but I think it's still fine. Probably a B- as well. Again, I don't think this is a terribly first pickable card, but you can take it after the removal's gone and after the bombs are gone, if there are any. So B- for Greenwheel Liberator. Heroic Intervention is up next. Heroic Intervention is 1 and a green for an instant at rare. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Now this will feel great when you nullify a fumigate, but that's not going to come up very much. Rares from Kaladesh aren't going to have a huge impact on this format. Realistically, this is going to be used similarly to Blossoming Defense, which is great. It's a great combat trick, don't get me wrong. You know, it's going to be a one-sided fog the rest of the time, which is also okay. You probably know that fogs are bad, but one-sided fogs, especially when they're cheap, which this one is, are fairly decent. Still, I don't think this is a bomb or anything. I'm not going to be picking it very early. I'm going to be picking it in the sort of good combat trick area of high-ish mid-pack. Still, if I've even slightly leaned towards green in my first couple of picks, I'm going to snap this up just like I would Blossoming Defense. But don't live too much in Magical Christmas Land, and don't hold this back. You know, if you can save just one creature with this, don't hold it back and say, well, I want to wait until they try to wipe my board. Save that creature if it's relevant and if it's going to really help you out. So I'm going to go with a C+ on it. I think it's just a good combat trick. Kind of hurts that it's a rare, but I see the power and the reason for it to be. Hidden Herbalists are up next. They are 1 and a green for a creature human druid at uncommon. They're a 2/2. They have revolt. When they enter the battlefield, if you've revolted, you get 2 green. It's a bear with an upside, so it's instantly a C+, but I don't think that upside is much of anything at all. I am not going to wait until turn 4 or 5 or 6 to drop this to get 2 extra mana. That's not going to do anything for me. And if I somehow magically manage to revolt early on turn 2 or turn 3, I get 2 mana. If I'm lucky and I have a 2-drop in hand, maybe that helps me out. It's not really going to ramp me because I have to pay 2 mana to get that 2 mana. I don't know. It seems way too much work for me to actually pull this off. So this really just feels like a bear with a minimal upside. I'll give it a C+, but it's a really weak C+. It's really just a bear, and I think that's going to be what it is most of the time, which means you're going to play it. And you're going to be fine playing it, but you're not going to be excited. So C+, a weak C+ for Hidden Herbalists. High Spire Infusion is up next. High Spire Infusion is 1 and a green for an instant at common. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. You get 2 energy. This is Giant Growth. Giant Growth is a single green mana for +3/+3, which is fine. It's a decent combat trick. Paying 1 more to get 2 energy is also fine. Green typically is pretty happy getting as much energy as it can. A solid include in most green decks, but not one to go out of your way. Mid-pack at the earliest, kind of middle of the road C, maybe a C+, but a weak C+ at that. So High Spire Infusion, C+, a weak C+. Lifecraft Awakening is up next. Lifecraft Awakening is X and a green for an instant at uncommon. Put X +1/+1 counters on target artifact you control. If it isn't a creature or vehicle, it becomes a 0/0 construct artifact creature. Turning a random artifact into a slightly overcosted vanilla creature plus whatever we spent on the artifact, not really what I'm in the market for. The one redeeming factor here, of course, is that it's an instant speed, so it could be a solid surprise. You can also, of course, throw it on a vehicle or throw it on a creature to make them even bigger. So it does have some utility, I guess. Still, this ultimately just feels like a difficult to optimally use combat trick, so I don't think I'll use it too much or pick it that highly. I'm going to put it at a C-. Yeah, I'm going to lose to it. I'm going to lose to it when somebody puts, 7 +1/+1 counters on a 7/7 trample or something like that, but I don't think that's going to be the right decision to play this too much. C-. I might give it a shot at some point, but probably not. Not to start anyways, so C- for Lifecraft Awakening. Up next is Lifecraft Cavalry. Lifecraft Cavalry is 4 and a green for a creature elf warrior at common. It's a 4/4 trample, which is kind of okay for a 5 mana creature. It's slightly overcosted from vanilla stats, but it's also not a vanilla creature. However, it has revolt. It enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it if you revolted this turn. So I'm not super into this on the non-revolted side. It's an okay curve topper if you need it. But if you can trigger revolt, a 6/6 trample is a serious threat, especially for 5 mana. I think I do like this creature, this revolt creature, because turn 5 is late enough that you can probably be expecting or be able to engineer some sort of revolting situation. You trade a creature in combat or something, or you throw a 2/2 at your opponent. And even if they have a 3/3 or 4/4, they're going to have to think about combat tricks, they're going to have to think about revolt, or they're just going to have to take 2 damage. So there's a way to engineer this late in the game. I'm still definitely hesitant on basically all the revolt creatures, so I don't want to go higher than a C+ on this, but I do see this being a huge groan when it comes down on turn 5 after I accepted a trade or greedily ate up a 2/2 or something like that, and suddenly I'm facing a 6/6 trample. So C+ to start. It could go up if revolt is something that you can basically count on all the time. Lifecrafter's Gift is next. Lifecrafter's Gift is 3 and a green for an instant at uncommon. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So this is at a minimum 2 +1/+1 counters on one creature at instant speed, which isn't bad. We've seen very similar cards to this costed at 3 and a green for instant speed, and they've always been all right. They often did something like untap the creature or things like that. The going off upside here of getting, a +1/+1 counter on like 2 or 3 or 4 or 7 different creatures is probably just not going to happen all that often. We had Fabricate in green where there were tons of creatures that could get counters on them. We had a black-green counters matters deck that just never really worked in Kaladesh, and I don't think it's going to work that much here either. Still, this is a decent enough combat trick that I'd include it if I had a spot. I just wouldn't strain myself to do so. So it's going to be kind of a middle-of-the-road C combat trick for me. C for Lifecrafter's Gift. Maulfist Revolutionary is up next. Maulfist Revolutionary is 1 green for a creature human warrior at uncommon. It's a 3/3 trample. A French vanilla creature that passes the vanilla test is always solid, but there's more when Maulfist Revolutionary enters the battlefield or dies. For each kind of counter on target permanent or player, give that permanent or player another counter of that kind. I will always, 100% of the time, play a 3/3 trample for 3, no questions asked, no additional abilities required. This is instantly a C+ at a bare minimum. Now, the ability is pretty cool. If you get some extra counters off the end of the battlefield effect or the dying trigger, cool. But that's just a pure bonus for me. It is a bonus enough that I will raise this up to a B-, and I will take this relatively highly. 3/3 for 3 with trample is just an absolute beating, and I think green is still going to be one of the better colors in the set and probably continue to be overdrafted as people snap up every Maulfist Revolutionary they can see. B- for me. Monstrous Onslaught is up next. Monstrous Onslaught is 3 green for a sorcery at uncommon. Monstrous Onslaught deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control as you cast Monstrous Onslaught. That's a little bit of a weird bit of rules text. I haven't really seen it on a card before. What it means is that as you cast it, it means what it says. As you cast it, it checks the power of creatures. If your opponent kills a creature in response, it doesn't matter. It's whatever the most powerful creature was when you put this on the stack, which is kind of cool. I get how they fixed it. It's a feel bad to cast this thinking you're going to deal 4 and then suddenly you actually deal like 1. But anyways, a lot of people have compared this to Pyrotechnics, which I think is way too optimistic. Pyrotechnics was this spell in red, but it only cost a single red, and it always did 4, divided as you choose. This could do 12. It won't. It really won't. I don't know. I don't think that this is going to reliably be a Pyrotechnics. There's only a couple 4+ power creatures in green in this set. And discounting rare, there's only like 1 or 2. In Kaladesh, there's only like 1 or 2 at the common slot. And of course, uncommons in Kaladesh will be basically rares when you're drafting 2 packs of Aether and 1 pack of Kaladesh. So I don't know. I don't see the likelihood of this reliably being 4 damage for me to say that this is Pyrotechnics snap first pick A+ card. Getting 3 damage off of it's probably a little bit more likely, but 3 damage for 5 isn't really where I want to be, especially not at instant speed. And the potential of this being 2 damage or 1 damage or 0 damage is way too high for me. Consistency is key when it comes to removal, and this is not consistent enough for me. It's like a Rabid Bite type card, but Rabid Bite was 2 mana. This is 5 mana. I'm willing to put a card in that's removal sometimes if it costs very little. This one does not. I don't know. I'm at kind of a C+ on this. The power is there for sure, and I probably will play it a fair amount of the time that I have it. But I'm super cautious on this card. I don't see the reliability being there. I could arguably go as high as a B-, but absolutely no higher than that. I'm going to go with a C+. Do not fall prey to best case scenario mentality here. Narnam Renegade is up next. Narnam Renegade is a single green mana for a creature elf warrior at uncommon. It's a 1/2. It's got Death Touch. Revolt. Narnam Renegade enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it if you revolted this turn. A 1/2 Death Touch for a single mana. 100% there. Totally sign me up. I have literally 0 cares if I ever revolt this card, and you should never, ever hold this card back just because maybe you'll revolt next turn. Play this card. Play this card every single time you have it. It doesn't matter if you get the counter. If you get the counter, cool. It lives through slightly more things. Does not matter. Run this out, be happy. It's a strictly better Typhoid Rats, basically. And that's a card that I will play 100% of the time and pick it relatively highly within kind of the first 4 or 5 picks. B- for Narnam Renegade. I think it's fantastic. Natural Obsolescence is up next. Natural Obsolescence is 1 and a green for an instant at common. Put target artifact on the bottom of its owner's library. Bottom of the library is just as good as the graveyard, and probably even better because there are things that recur artifacts back from the graveyard. Being instant speed is amazing with this. This is probably my new favorite artifact removal spell in the set. I will main deck this every single time. Some other artifact hate spells I kind of waffle on and I say, well, I'd play them in sealed, but not really in draft. No, this one's going in my deck every single time. I would maybe even play 2. But yeah, this is just fantastic. This is probably going to be the best artifact hate in the entire set. C+ for me. It's not going to go any higher. It's not guaranteed removal if your opponent doesn't have that many artifacts, but C+, main deck it every single time. Peema Aether Sear is next. Peema Aether Sear is 3 and a green for a creature elf druid at uncommon. It's a 3/2. When it enters the library, you get an amount of energy equal to the greatest power among creatures you control, so at least 3. Pay 3 energy. Target creature blocks this turn if able. Getting at least the 3 energy is nice, though I wouldn't necessarily expect more than that on average. Don't expect that you're going to be getting 12 energy off of this or anything like that. Now, this sort of forcing a creature to block effect is often criminally underrated by players who haven't experienced them before. Make no mistake, forcing a specific creature to block is a really powerful effect. You've got a giant awesome bomb, that's cool. I have a 1/2 that you have to block with that giant awesome bomb, and it's gonna go away. Super powerful effect here, really, really powerful. Even getting to use it a single time is probably good if you have the Death Touchers, if you have ways to kill things, which, I think you're going to be fine in green. I think this probably goes best in green-black because then you can get a good number of Death Touchers and whatnot in your deck. I think this is a very solid card. I think it's a relatively high pick, kind of through 3rd, 4th, 5th pick area. B-, I will play every single one of these I can ever get my hands on. I really love forcing creatures to block. Super solid effect, B-. Prey Upon is up next. Prey Upon is a single green mana for a sorcery at common. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. I am always fine with Prey Upon. Yeah, we've seen better versions that were instant speed or one-sided, or they gain a power or toughness boost or both. But Prey Upon is the original fight card, and it's a single mana. You can always fit one of these in, and you'll always be fairly happy to have it. It's not premium removal. You do have to have a creature on the battlefield. You do hopefully have a creature that's bigger than another creature, but you're green. You're more often than not going to have one, and it'll be fine. Relatively high pick, kind of high mid. I never feel great first picking it, although I have, but high mid pack, B-. Ridgescale Tusker is up next. 3 green for a giant pangolin looking thing. Creature beast. It's an uncommon. It's a 5/5 for 5. When Ridgescale Tusker enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. This is ridiculous. Green is looking amazing yet again at common and uncommon, so I expect it to be very heavily drafted yet again. It's a 5/5 for 5. Perfectly passes the vanilla test. 5/5 for 5 is starting to get to the point, though, where we're saying, why, you don't want to spend that much mana on something that doesn't do anything, but this does something. Puts a counter on every single other creature on the board. This is disgusting. This just seems like a solid first pick to me. A lot of removal might not even compete with this as far as me taking this first pick. I think it's amazing. I'm going to go with a B+. No higher because you have to have creatures on the battlefield. If you play this as a vanilla 5/5 as the only creature, it's not great. It's still fine. It's not great. But yeah, B+, this is just disgusting. And yeah, green's going to have some good cards yet again. Well, let's finish off another cycle with the legendary green creature, Rishkar, Peema, Renegade. Rishkar is 2 and a green for a legendary creature elf druid at rare. He's a 2/2. When Rishkar, Peema, Renegade enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Each creature you control with a counter on it has tap, add green to your mana pool. I really like Rishkar. Casting this on curve is going to set up some really serious ramp. Throwing a counter on your 2-drop hopefully making it a 3/3 if it was a bear, and a counter on Rishkar, making him a 3/3, gives you two 3/3 mana dorks on turn 4. With your 4th land, you're going to be dropping 6 drops. Insane. I will first pick Rishkar every single time I see him and dive deep into green ramp. Not quite a bomb, but a super, super, super solid utility creature that's going to enable some disgusting curve out hands, and not even curve out, but curve out ramp hands. B+, love Rishkar, solid first pick. Rishkar's expertise is 4 green for a sorcery at rare. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. I'm not super sure on how to rate this. This is kind of like Monstrous Onslaught, where you need to have a big creature for this to be any good. If you don't have, if you have a 2-power creature, this just seems expensive. 4 green for 2 cards, plus a free 5-drop, but you have to have a 5-drop in your hand. If I get 2 cards and play a 2-drop for 6 mana, I'm not going to be happy with that. So a lot of stuff seems to be required to go right on the battlefield and in your hand at the same time for this card to be good. Yeah, there's going to be some disgusting things. You're going to drop a 5-drop creature. You're going to drop a freaking Ridgescale tusker after drawing 5 cards or something like that, and it's going to be disgusting value for your 6 mana. But there's a lot of times where it's not going to work. I don't like cards where there's a lot of time where it's not going to work, or where you're going to be paying way too much mana for way too little of effect. So I'm going to go with a C on this to start. Yeah, it could be super powerful. If it's reliably powerful, I'm happy to be wrong, but I just don't trust the reliability. So C for Rishkar's expertise. Scrounging Bunder is up next. Scrounging Bunder is 1 and a green for a creature cat monkey at common. It's a 0/0, but it does enter the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, so it is a bear. Now, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Scrounging Bunder onto another target creature. How much more amazing can you make a grizzly bear? Hopefully not too much more than this, otherwise we're going to see some serious power creep. A 2/2 for 2 is instantly a C. So that will, always be something that we're totally okay playing. We've talked about that a bunch in this set review so far. But being able to shift its power elsewhere when it starts to be irrelevant is crazy. Throwing those counters on a flyer, throwing those counters on a big trampler, insane. And this is at common. Green is going to be overpowered again in this set. I'm calling it right now. Green is going to be overdrafted. It's going to be overpowered. You are going to lose a lot of the time that you see a turn 1 forest go down on your opponent's side of the battlefield. And that sucks a little bit. Hopefully it's not as crazy. Hopefully the other colors are a bit better. Blue definitely looks better than it was in Kaladesh. So we'll see how it shapes out. But green is looking a little bit overpowered, and Scrounging Bunder at common is a good example of this. Fantastic common. I'm going to pick it pretty darn highly. I don't know that I'd first pick it. It would require a really bad pack for that, but it's still going to be a high mid-pack card for me. Solid B- for Scrounging Bunder. Our second last card is Silkweaver Elite. Silkweaver Elite is 2 and a green for a creature elf archer at common. It's a 2/2 with reach. It has revolt when it enters the battlefield. If you revolted this turn, draw a card. It's a 3/3 reach for, it's a 2/2 reach for 3 with a card attached to it maybe, which is fine. Probably just filler material, maybe even a sideboard card if you see flyers that you can't deal with, although a 2/2 isn't really going to do too much against a lot of flyers. Probably green filler, mid to late pack pick, middle of the road C for me. I'll play it and I'll feel fine, but it's not something I'm going to go out of my way for. Our final card is Unbridled Growth. Unbridled Growth is a single green mana for an enchantment aura at common. Enchant land. Enchanted land has, quote, tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Sacrifice Unbridled Growth. Draw a card. This is basically the Attune with Aether of the set, but it's less good, though still totally fine for enabling green-based 4-color shenanigan decks. The ability to get a card once you've used what you need off of it is really nice, though I'm not sure it's enough for me to really put this into a 2-color deck. 3, 4, 5 colors, yeah, these are key. You're going to want these. You're going to even pick these probably a little bit highly. Probably not as high a pick as Attune was. The energy is probably better in the decks that liked to go 4 colors, because they usually went 4 colors for things like Voltaic Brawler or for Whirler Virtuoso or things like that. Probably not as high pick, but still a solid C+ when you're feeling colorful. So that's going to wrap it up for the green set review. Green looks powerful. I'm looking at my spreadsheet and I see so many Bs, B minuses, B pluses, especially at common and uncommon. I think that green is going to run over this format just like it did in Kaladesh. Hopefully not as badly or as unbalancedly. We'll see how it goes, but I would love if I could get into green early, but I do worry that it's going to be a little bit overdrafted. Anyways, let me know what you think of green. Do you think it's as crazy as I think it is? Do you think it's actually totally okay? Do you think another color is overdrafted? Because we have, or not overdrafted, but unbalanced or powerful. We have covered all the colors now. As I said, tomorrow will be the gold cards and the first half of the artifacts, and then the next day will be the last half of the artifacts and the single land. As I mentioned at the top of the video, make sure that you do hit subscribe so that you can see all of the Aether Revolt release content that's going to come out, as well as my usual weekly series. If you do enjoy the content, click that thumbs up icon. It super helps the discoverability of my series and videos and etc. It gets it out to people who may not know about it. As well, share my content. Share it on Reddit, on your local Facebook groups, etc. Spread the word and the channel gets to grow. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at TheManaLeak. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can find me at Facebook.com/TheManaLeak, Twitch.tv/TheManaLeak, and Patreon.com/TheManaLeak if you want to become a backer there, and there are reward tiers you can check out. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see you all tomorrow for the first half of the artifacts and the gold cards.